Dark than days, Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds record,
Skeleton Tree.
This is the latest full-length LP from singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist Nick Cave, musical legend, and the follow-up to the band's 2013 record, Push the Sky Away. Admittedly, one of my least favorite records in the Cave discography. A really slow, syrupy, spacey, emotionally flat record that didn't really leave much of an impression on me. The album, for the most part, felt like being stranded in some kind of emotional purgatory, not quite heaven, not quite hell. And Cave's latest record over here is equally spacey and kind of drony, quiet, subtle. However, this album sees the return of Nick Cave after what was an incredible tragedy in his life last year, losing his son Arthur Cave. And since Nick likes to focus on evil and tragedy in his music so much, those who were in the know were no doubt looking for this to manifest itself in some kind of way in the music on this record. Now, even before getting into the lyrics of this record, I will say, in comparison with Push the Sky Away, the emotional tone of this record is very dark, is very despondent, outright depressing. I'd say the difference emotionally between this record and Nick Cave's last is absolutely night and day, despite this new album not really being much more aggressive than Push the Sky Away. The potent sadness that runs throughout this record, even though the album is slow and is a very patient album, creates a severe sense of tension, which pretty much keeps every single song engaging as Nick Cave just performs one emotional exorcism after another across these 8 cuts, many of which sound almost improvised or ad-libbed to an extent. Once the instrumental's drony backdrop kind of starts, or the very subtle musical embellishments are established that the band will continue to run through as the song progresses, Nick Cave is sort of free to just emotionally explore the topic of the song as he sees fit. A lot of the time, Nick Cave is waxing poetic on the human condition, love, loss, as well as mortality, and the incredible amount of sorrow on this record. Nick Cave channels it into a lot of different things. This isn't just some album where Nick Cave is blatantly putting his tragedy out there in bold, plain lyrics for all to see, hear, and read. He's not coming out of this record to exploit his personal misfortune for prying eyes and ears. And from what I understand, a good deal of these songs were already written or conceived long before the tragedy in question had even happened. Now, there is a pretty prominent moment on the record on the track Girl in Amber, which is one of the most lyrically intriguing tracks on the entire record, where Nick Cave is kind of going over what seems like a recently shattered conception of death and the afterlife, which is set to these very lonely pianos and the dreariest choral vocals I've heard on an album in a long time. The track seems to mostly reference this girl or this moment in time in the past that's almost frozen, or I can't quite tell. You know, there's a lot of imagery in this track, and the others too, that is super surreal, esoteric, really difficult to put a clear finger on what exactly Nick is trying to convey sometimes. Though I will say, the ending moments of this cut where Nick Cave is singing in this ghostly vocal, "Don't touch me," is absolutely haunting. Another song about losing someone, but in a more abstract and romantic way, is the song I Need You, which features these really depressing refrains where Nick is singing in the voice of really a broken man. Nothing really matters. The performance on this track is pitifully sad, and intentionally so. The instrumental in the background is a bit of soft, easy-going rock music, which is thickened up with these synth chords that work very nicely into the track. And we also have the very powerfully dark and lyrically vivid Jesus Alone, where Nick is referencing really a lot of different things. A drug addict, a girl filled with forbidden, I guess, sexual
energy,
an African doctor harvesting tear ducts. And Nick on the chorus seems to be calling out to all of these people with his voice or with this song. I'm not 100% sure about what it is about all these characters that sort of makes Nick think about all of them in this one track, but maybe further listens will reveal that into the future, which are most definitely warranted because even without understanding the full meaning, it is a beautiful and a sad and an emotionally traumatizing track. On the song Rings of Saturn, Nick Cave is singing over these sparse drums and these kind of glistening, shy, sporadic synth keys that kind of sputter throughout the track. And the lyrics tell the story of what seems like a girl who's almost like a slave to her sexual desires, or maybe her profession or the world that she's in. He seems to talk about her being born to do what she's doing, whether that is because of her personality or her genetic makeup or her surroundings or her upbringing. I'm not entirely sure. Seems like she's engaging in some kind of destructive behavior, which is also affecting Nick in a significant way, as he's referring to whatever association he has with this person as being like slavery. The lyrical imagery on the last verse of the track actually gets pretty strange, and it actually would have been one of my favorite tracks here if not for the fact that the ending really fizzles out, which sort of goes back to the fact that even though this album is a much more emotionally potent record than the previous Bad Seeds album, still the songwriting structure and the songwriting style is mostly the same, which was slightly a turnoff for me on that record. Still though, I do love the song Magneto, which features some of the darkest instrumentation on the entire record, especially this heavy groaning bass, and over the track lyrically, Cave delivers one of his most dramatic performances, a lot of the time referencing what seems like a sickness in him, maybe making reference to a time in his life when he was addicted to drugs, intravenous drugs specifically, talking about throwing up in the sink, clutching the bowl. Anthrocene I consider to be a pretty stunning and commanding track on the record, definitely one of those moments where even though this is a relatively soft and quiet album, this is a track that will demand your attention merely because Cave sort of performs on this track like an actor in the spotlight. And on the song Distant Sky, this is maybe the only cut in the track listing here that probably could have fit snugly onto Push the Sky Away, which features not only some of the most broken and sad vocals from Cave on the entire record, but also a very lovely guest vocal performance from Elsa Torp, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who interjects in between Cave's verses in this angelic set of melodies, which is a very nice counterpoint to what Cave is doing on the track. Now the closing track on this thing, Skeleton Tree, feels almost like a glimmer of hope, like a ray of sunshine amongst all these incredibly dark tracks. Cave is sort of left with a bit of much-needed catharsis after all of these incredibly depressing songs. Catharsis that at this point I think the audience needed a little bit of too. He seems to have gained a little bit more emotional and vocal composure on this track as well. It's like he's moving past the trauma of the previous 7 songs and now starting a new day and a clean slate. Overall, I was really impressed with this record. It is a beautiful, dark, moving, intensely sad, and emotionally potent album, despite the fact that it is such a quiet record, it is such a subtle record. And I'm glad that Cave and company were able to come through with a captivating record, come through with a compelling record, without having to change the formula too much from what they were doing on Push the Sky Away. Still, I do wish the songs were a little more structurally sound, but that doesn't really seem to take away from much of what the album is already doing incredibly well. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this thing. Tran. And those are my thoughts on this new Nick Cave record. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it, guys. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Skeleton Tree, forever.